if you understand why an adversary is doing what they're doing, you can then make sure that you tailor your lifestyle to be the best person you can be without exposing yourself to risk. So why would you put someone in your organization in charge of really sensitive data without giving them the tools they need to understand why? So people do all sorts of things for reasons they don't really understand, exposes them to risk. So there is no 100% panacea to risk. It's all around us.
Welcome to The Growth Switch, the podcast where we dive into the strategies, struggles, and breakthroughs of bold business leaders. I'm your host, Jules Fox, growth strategist and lead content creator at Aries Media. I'm here to uncover how today's top brands are scaling, overcoming challenges, and unlocking sustainable success. Now, for those of you just tuning in, Aries Media helps grow successful brands with comprehensive, hands-on support for sales, business development, and performance marketing. And if you're into that, go ahead and drop growth into the comments, and we will show you how to do that. Now, today on The Growth Switch, I am joined by Andrew Clark. He's the CEO of Recyber. He's a former military strategist, and he's on a mission to turn human risk into organizational resilience through leadership, innovation, and a smarter approach to cybersecurity. Andrew, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Jules. Really nice to be here. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Just an absolute privilege to have you. So tell me a little bit more about Recyber. What was it that you saw as a product market fit that you decided to get into this?
Well, it's an interesting thing. It really stems from my military background, Jules, and how understanding the adversary is very much the way we overcome significant challenges in the military. Because the adversary is always trying to unhinge us in one particular way or another. It's no different in cyberspace with cyber adversaries, whether they're nation-state actors or they're just someone trying to have a go hack. It really doesn't matter. They're all trying to do one thing, and that's to unhinge another human. It's like any great scam artist or magician that uses sleight of hand. It's the same technique. Is that if you expose yourself to weakness in something you don't know or something you don't understand, then you will find that hackers try and exploit that weakness because they can. So we really looked at how we could help people and organizations understand more about the risks that they're exposed to personally, but also organizationally, because the staff bring that risk to the workplace. And it really wasn't being looked at, not in a granular detail like we are looking at it, in individual risk. Yes, there's lots of programs out there that look at cybersecurity awareness and help people understand more by expecting to watch videos and to click on links and to engage with a program. But we're all busy people, and we all need to be cognizant of how busy people are. And in that understanding of how busy people are, we developed Republic, which is a program that looks at individual risk, but in a way that's really engaging and not at all fatiguing, so it doesn't cause people bother, and it only looks at the things you don't know. And we understand that from the things we ask you. So in other words, it's not turgid, and it's not something that is creating burden on you as an individual. It's something you do because you want to engage with it. So going back to the basics really are about understanding humans in a way that other people don't. So if you understand why an adversary is doing what they're doing, you can then make sure that you tailor your lifestyle to be the best person you can be without exposing yourself to risk. And that can come in all sorts of ways, whether it's social media presence, whether it's being a kind individual, letting someone through a controlled access or privileged access area because they're carrying coffees and donuts, and you just want to be a kind individual and let them through. Or sitting on a train doing M&A work with someone shoulder surfing, or speaking too loudly down the pub about a particular client you've got. These are things we do every single day, but humans are not aware of the risks that they expose their organizations to by doing that. So it's really about narrowing that lens and helping each individual to understand, if I do this, am I exposing myself and my personal life as well as my organization to risk? So really, whilst we help organizations in the organizational space, everything we do on the individual basis helps people to understand better their personal risk too.
Yeah. I mean, every organization, no matter how strong you believe, you're only as strong as your weakest link, right? So it's very much not always a tech issue. It's often a human issue. So I think a lot of companies, they don't understand the human risk and they don't realize how weak their weak links are. And I don't mean to at all be insulting by saying that, but how should leadership shift their approach so that they can make this more comprehensive so that everybody gets it?
Well, I think it has to be a mindset shift, because a lot of leaders, I think they do rely quite heavily on technical solutions to what is effectively a human problem. And I wouldn't expect a vet to operate on a human, even though they probably know what they're doing, because there are different things that happen in a human body that happen in an animal's body, for example.
Yeah.
And I think that when we look at cybersecurity, we try and cast it under the exact same light. Now, we're talking about cyber behaviors or human behaviors in the cyber domain. Again, like I said earlier, how do you behave which exposes yourself to risks that a hacker can exploit? That's not the same as the hacker getting through your firewall or your antivirus, although it is, but in a human sense.
Right.
So the way I try and explain to leadership about the type of risk that we are dealing with is we've all got modern cars these days, and these modern cars come equipped with all sorts of sensors and protection systems in a technical basis. But if you're driving in a way that is dangerous or just careless, you're exposing yourself to risk. And it's the careless driver which will drive into the wall. And you hope, therefore, that the technology deploys the airbag or the impact protection system protects your car from causing damage to the individual. But the point is that the user, the human, is driving the car. Now, that might not be the case in the next 25 years when we see human cars being driven without human. I mean, we're seeing it already, but whether that takes off is another thing. But I try to explain to leadership, would you put somebody in a car and expect them to drive it that has no training and no understanding of the risks that exist on the road? You wouldn't do it. So why would you put someone in your organization in charge of really sensitive data without giving them the tools they need to understand why they might be at risk and how to deal with those risks if they find them or see them in their own personal life or at work, for that matter?
Yeah. But, just to piggyback on what you said, it does bring up an interesting point. Do you think that in the future, as intelligence advances and as the hackers advance, do you think that they will be able to trick AI? You think that you're foolproof. You think you've got this great AI in place. You've definitely got all the protocols set up, but nothing is foolproof, right? Don't you think that in the future, people would be able to potentially hack through AI security?
Yeah, well, look, nothing is foolproof. Nothing you can put in place is going to be 100% effective. I know that being a security professional. I know that from being a defense, but you can have the best plan in the world. What I'm talking about here is narrowing the lens so that we reduce the risk surface. So if I'm the type of person that posts online about everything I do at work, that should be something that you temper, right? Because if you don't temper it, you end up exposing yourself to risk. I know hotel concierge people that would post about the VIP that was turning up at their hotel the following week. And then you have an entourage of people outside. That's a very simple exposure to risk. But people just think, I'm going to say that so-and-so is coming to our hotel because that helps me grow likes on my social media platform, or it makes you look like an influencer. So people do all sorts of things for reasons they don't really understand, exposes them to risk. So there is no 100% panacea to risk. It's all around us. But if we can reduce and narrow that lens or the risk surface so that people are more cognizant of the risk that they expose to their organizations, then that will create more resilient workplaces. And, and altruistically, if you create more resilient workplaces, you're creating more resilient organizations, and therefore the economy is more resilient. If the economy is more resilient, so is our national security. So it's a real kick-on effect towards international stability. We start working on the very small things, and they work their way up. So I think that you can be ambivalent and oblivious to the risk. You can say, okay, why do I need house insurance? My house has never been broken into. I don't need cyber insurance because I've never suffered a cyber attack. I don't need any of the tools that stop me from being attacked by a cyber criminal because I'm not a target. The problem with cyber attacks is they are generally indiscriminate. In general terms, the majority of risks that have manifested themselves into threats at organizational level have come because of a derivative or an indiscriminate deployment of malware, which it's completely permeable to, or it permeates rather, every single layer of our society without impunity, because you can't contain it. It's like the fallout of a nuclear bomb. You can't contain that fallout. It will go into places you didn't expect it to. The cybercriminal doesn't care about that. And so for people to think they are outside a risk envelope is quite dangerous, because you might find yourself falling foul of a threat like Maersk, for example. That wasn't a direct attack on Maersk. They were just collateral damage for a deployment of Russian malware that attacked the Ukrainians. So that originated in Ukraine and ended up in Maersk software. just because it sorts its way in there. It's not something you can sort of hide behind the pillow on and hope that it doesn't attack you. It's one of those things that can happen anytime.
Yeah.
As Marks and Spencer has found out.
Yeah. Now, I think when we start talking about people make mistakes. It's natural. It's human to err. But a lot of times a strong team would be able to own those mistakes because they need to feel psychologically safe. So what are some of your lessons that you've learned about psychological safety and how that relates to the team and leadership?
Psychological safety is the foundation for good learning outcomes. It doesn't matter who you are. I've got 3 teenage children. I know that trying to punish them for something they did is often futile. If they've done something, they need to learn why that was wrong, not that they were wrong. Okay, they might get told by others that they were wrong in what they did, but largely they don't learn anything if they're told to do something at the point of doing something wrong. So you have to try and teach them along the way. Now, that's not always possible, I get it, but psychological safety is really, really key to making sure that people learn properly. And unfortunately, with some of today's solutions, they're absolutely not psychologically safe. They are there to deceive you. Phishing simulations, for example. And one of the problems with a phishing simulation is if you're trying to catch somebody out, you are effectively breaching the social covenant that exists between an employee and an employer because people don't want to be caught out. Why? Because if that being caught out leads to a punitive measure, remedial training, or in some cases, do it 5 times and you're out of a job, you don't click on a link after the 3rd time when you've had your interview without coffee with your line manager. You don't click on a link ever again. And if you're working in purchasing where it's your job to click on a link, what do you think happens? You're not very good at your job anymore. Performance goes to the floor. And that is part of the whole process of this social contract. If you don't prepare people properly for the jobs they're doing and the risks they're exposed to in the job, then you're not being a good boss. You're not being a good organization. So it either leads to deviance or avoidance, both of which do not or are not conducive to a good, secure environment. So psychological safety is a key tenet within everything we do. So we never triangulate information about a particular risk lower than 3 people, because that allows those people to operate feeling safe in a knowledge that if they are doing something wrong because of something they don't know, that they won't be pinpointed for that. So by doing that, you create a safe environment that allows those individuals to operate and engage with a system of education rather than to go, I'm not engaging with this because someone is spying on me. Because as soon as you do that, you lose engagement altogether.
Yeah.
Deviant, and that's an avoidant. And why wouldn't you? No one likes being spied on. Yeah. And so there are 2 schools of thought. One is the deviance bit. And I've found in through experience that some people, they think that by clicking on the phishing link, they're somehow being devious towards the IT team. Yeah. But what they don't know is they don't know it's not a simulation.
Yeah.
Because funnily enough, the whole idea of the phishing simulation is to catch you out. So don't say in big red letters on the top of the email, this is a phishing simulation. I want you to learn why it is a phishing simulation. They say, got you. You shouldn't have done that.
Right.
So some people, they click on the link anyway because they just want to annoy the IT department and go, you can't catch me out. I'm just going to play with you. That's deviance, and that can lead to really catastrophic consequences down the line.
Yeah.
Because people are that way inclined. But this is what the psychological safety, if it isn't there, leads to. The other one is avoidance, where they'll just turn off the machine and not engage with it. So they'll just click X and get rid of the phishing simulation. What we do at ReCyber, for example, is we tell you it's a phishing simulation because it's a learning environment. Because there's no point in expecting you to know everything. Because if we expect that and you don't, you're just going to get pissed off with us.
Yeah. So, I'm sure it's much more comprehensive than that. When a company needs more protection, when they really want to be proactive and take matters into their own hands, what does that journey look like of them working with ReCyber and getting enhanced security?
So we have a platform which we've built, which has got a taxonomy, which is a proprietary taxonomy, which has looked at a whole bunch of risky behaviors, which are manifested in risk at the organizational level. So and this is a long list of different types of behaviors, and within each behavior there's a derivative action or activity which may result in that risky behavior manifesting itself in a risk at organizational level or at personal level for that matter. Just because you are pretty poor at your social media presence, it doesn't mean you won't have a funds transfer fraud attack on you by someone trying to say they're from your bank just by information that you provided, or they'll steal your identity and go to the bank and impersonate you, and maybe they'll get money that way. So it's not always at the organizational level, but what we're trying to do is we're trying to engage the individuals, and we do that through the taxonomy. So we ask very simple questions with multiple choice answers. And each one of those questions is no longer than 30 seconds long. It's served through Teams. It's a simple app that allows organizations to use their Office 365 tenant, so they don't need to install any new software or anything. And those questions that get asked build a profile of risk about the person. Now, the good thing about these questions is we get two types of data from it. If you know the answer, that's great. We won't bug you with that type of question again because we know you know that.
Mm-hmm.
If you get the answer wrong, we get two bits of data from that. One, we know that when you answered the question, you didn't understand it and therefore you probably didn't know much about it. But two is that you chose an answer which wasn't the answer to that question, which means you don't know about the answer either because you wouldn't have chosen that answer. So that's two bits of really good data we're getting out of a question they answer wrong. Now we're not about punishment. So we're not there sitting in the wings going, oh, you didn't get that right. We're going to fire another question at you, see if you get it right. What we're going to do is we're going to build a profile over time. And when we built that profile, we then start to deliver interventions through micro trainings. That could be a 45-second tutorial, or it could be just a very helpful video, no longer than a minute, which says to you, right, we know, Jules, that you don't understand the security around removable media, for example. So we're going to give you an example. We're going to give you a video that tells you exactly why removable media is a risk to your organization. Now, hopefully you go away from that video going, yeah, I really didn't know that. I really didn't know that was a problem. And we know you didn't know it was a problem because so it's almost playing to the idea that you didn't know about it and you need educated. So we are training you in it rather than what goes on at the moment, which is you watch a video for 30, 40 minutes. At the end of it, you get 20 questions based on the video you've just watched. And you've got to answer 18 for compliance purposes to get 80%.
Yeah.
You will not be released from that training, in inverted commas, until you've answered 80% of the questions. Now, that's great if you've got a photographic memory. That's great if you didn't go and make a cup of tea or do the laundry whilst that 40-minute video was playing. That's great if you don't sit there with the window minimized whilst the video is playing in the background, cracking on with the work that you're already behind on.
Right.
So that whole idea about, we'll just get them to do the compliance training at some point in the year. And that's good enough for us to make sure that our organization is protected from cyber attack.
Yeah.
Well, okay, fine. We'll go back to the point of saying that you can never protect 100% of the people 100% of the time. Mm-hmm. And you can't protect 100% of the business 100% of the time either. But what you can do is you can narrow the lens. So if I'm now saying to you, look, over the course of a year, you are getting a continuous engagement with us understanding the risks that you don't understand and never bothering you with the things you do understand. And you are getting training segments in micro-training parts against those particular risks, then we are closing the gap for the hacker to exploit.
Yeah.
And what we aren't doing is giving everybody the same video and asking everybody the same questions. And we all know what people are like, because just for the reason I said earlier, they haven't got time to watch a 40-minute video when they're already behind on 5 deadlines. Mm-hmm. They would choose the least path of resistance. They'll wait until the moment they are told by HR to go and do their training. Now, it may well be that training works for 60% of the people, but it doesn't work for all of them. And we want it to work for as many people as possible, because if you choose a regime that people are engaged with and they're incentivized through pointsification or gamification, which is an element of our platform, mm-hmm. you now find that the people enjoy engaging with the program. Why? Because they're getting something out of it. No one wants to do something they're not getting anything out of. And if you show me a video and then ask me questions at the end of it, and let's say 60% of that video I already know, you're wasting my time for 60% of me watching that video. Why would I do that?
Yeah.
That's pointless. So it's efficiencies. And this is built into the workflow within the organization. So it's
Mhm.
not ever overburdening people. And if they don't want to answer the question there and then, they don't have to. The other
Yeah.
benefit of it, Jules, which is a really key benefit, is that, in the UK, we have the Ministry of Transport test, which happens every year.
Mhm,
You
mhm.
can take your car in, whether it's 1 year old or 25 years old, it does the same test. It comes out of the garage, you drive it down the road, you put it into a huge, great pothole, and it breaks one of the track rod ends. You don't know you're driving around in a car that is dangerous now for the other 364 days of the year until you do that MOT test again. So if now you're telling me that if I do one test in the year, now you're satisfied that I know all I need to know about cybersecurity.
Yeah. It's ridiculous when you put it that way. Absolutely.
So that's what we help organizations close the gap, narrow the risk surface, and create more resilient workers. And also, they are likely to, and you alluded to it earlier, if you build better behaviors in people, that inculcates a better culture across the organization. Because if I'm the type of person that's willing to call something out because I know there's not going to be a punitive measure for the person that is doing something wrong. And I can say, right, Jules, you didn't do that right. And you say, why was that? And I can then explain to you because I know what it is you did wrong. That's a much better exchange than IT phoning you up and saying you need to have an interview with HR because you got this wrong.
Yeah.
So it's just building a better culture across the organization that says, hey, it's okay to make mistakes, but we're all here to make sure that we don't make that many mistakes. And if I'm better prepared, I can make more secure decisions. Someone
Mhm.
once said to me, you make decisions in the here and now based on the information you have to hand.
Yeah.
If we can give you more information to make more informed decisions, you can be a securer individual for that organization.
Yeah. Yeah. I could see that for sure. So sounds like you take away the risk. You take away the risk of messing up, the risk of punitive damages happening, and you replace that with something more enjoyable, something this is a value add. This is going to make my life more enjoyable. And this is fantastic. This is a great business model. But how do you find the right people to work with, the right organizations to work with, and how do they find you?
Yeah, well, that's difficult because the point I was making earlier about the ambivalence around this type of risk, because people are not alive to it. So
Yeah.
it's really difficult in terms of outreach because you've got a bunch of competition out there that are doing things in very different ways. The cybersecurity market is really saturated, and I think that to a degree there were a lot of people out there selling and reselling solutions that people didn't need.
Mhm.
So because of that, people have become very wary of what is being sold to them, and so as a result, they closed down in being receptive to cybersecurity chat. Because whenever I talk to people about cybersecurity, they're like, "Oh, that's a really interesting subject. You must be overwhelmed with people getting in touch with you." I said, "Well, you'd be surprised because what do people look for? If you were looking for the business that we deal in, what are you looking for? Are you putting in cyber risk to Google? Are you putting in human risk management? Are you putting behavioral management? What are you putting?" There's a whole sort of sea of indifference out there from people, but they also don't know what they're looking for. We work through channel partners that have got trusted relationships with many people already because that is the best way to get into the market. We rely on word of mouth. A lot of our business is because people have said we work with Recyber, or there's a banner in the signature block that says we protect our people with Republic. And I think that going back to what we spoke about earlier about the mind and the change in that opinion is, I think organizations have got to be very clear with how they want to empower their people to make those secure decisions I spoke about earlier. Because if you're doing that, you are therefore helping your staff to feel as though they aren't about to go and sign you up to a $2 billion loss off your market cap.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Because one person, imagine how that person feels when they realize they're the one that did it. It's a big problem, and I dare say that some of the recent attacks that have happened, there are people in that workplace that are feeling really, really bad about themselves right now because they facilitated an attack which cost people a lot of money.
And then in turn, a lot of jobs as well. This is not just a financial issue. Then you're going to have to layoffs. You're going to have all kinds of problems.
Well, exactly.
It sounds to me like preventative medicine, where a doctor is saying, hey, if I could show you how to eat a little bit better And if I could show you how to just move your body a little bit more, we're going to prevent a lot of problems down the line. You're going to be healthier for longer, and you're going to prevent those knee injuries and all these things coming up. But unfortunately, a lot of the people are going to wait until after the knee injuries and say, doctor, what can I do? Like, how can I fix this? And you say, well, go back 15 years and make better life choices, you know?
If only I'd listened to my coach years ago when I was running around and saying you should stretch before and stretch after. At 25 years of age, I don't care about that. I've just played a hockey tournament in Holland, and I played for 3 days solid, 10 hockey games. So, solidly for about 5 or 6 hours over those 3 days. Each day it got harder to get out of bed. But I remember my 25-year-old self that would be out and doing that 10 days solid and not even feeling a little tweak. So prevention absolutely is better than cure. And so the way I look at this and another way I explain to leadership about what we're doing, I said, could you imagine let's say your work floor plate, everyone's come in on the Monday morning, they all look groggy. They've all got a bit of a cough, some of them got a temperature, but they're all coughing and spluttering, blowing their noses, etc. Would you bring in one doctor to say, right, I know what you've all got. I'm going to medicate all of you the same way. I'm going to give you this pill. Everyone takes it for the next 7 days and you will all be better in 7 days' time.
Yeah. Everybody gets the same antibiotic, same thing.
Everybody gets the same antibiotic.
Right.
How stupid is that?
Yeah.
That is not an individual process. It's not an individual approach to it's not taking a temperature. It's not taking some blood tests. It's not understanding why that person is ailing the way they are. Because if you do that, you then can provide the right type of antibiotic that will solve the problem. It's the same with human risk. If I say everyone is suffering from the same problem, everyone is suffering from a risk of phishing. That might well be the case. But to say everyone's suffering and that's the only thing they're suffering from and deliver a phishing solution to then try and hopefully rid all evils, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Because why? The hacker is really sophisticated. No different than the virus in your body is sophisticated. It morphs into different ways where it gets resistance to types of antibiotics. So you can never treat the same, two people with the same antibiotic and hope for the same outcome.
Yeah. So in that case, I guess I've got a tough question. And it is, this, as you said, is a matter of national security. You have this ripple down effect where to protect our economy, to protect our jobs, to protect our people, this stuff is important. And I don't think that everybody takes it seriously enough. It is fantastic to have referrals. But if you were to try to expand your company and, over the next 5 years, say we're going to 10 times X the growth. We're going to 10X the number of companies that you're working with so that we can protect more people, have more of an impact, have a greater legacy. How could you do that? How could you do that for the company and meet those right people where they are and get them on board?
So are you talking about how we would grow it from a scale point of view or how we would get that level of traction?
Yeah. I mean, I think the question is both, honestly. I think it is I think that how would you meet more people to get them, to convince them to, in a sense, sell them on what they should already know to be true, which in turn, of course, would grow the company, right?
No, absolutely. And it's a difficult one. So we're still a small company in terms of we don't have a huge sales team. We deal with channel partners and membership organizations because membership organizations got some really fertile ground in terms of customers. You look at the UK's Institute of Directors, for example, or Make UK, large membership organisations that have got a huge membership value. And I like to be able to have a one-to-many approach because that's always going to save me time in trying to generate leads. I do a lot of networking. It's fascinating over the last 3-4 months how many people have what I've been talking about has resonated with them because they really do see a change in perception of what is causing or is contributing to cyber risks and threats. And I think they're coming around to the idea that more and more people are being exploited. And that is what is causing the risk. Our behaviors team in ReCyber will say that 100% of cyber attacks is because of a human. They didn't do something they should have done. They did something they shouldn't have done, or they were coerced and did something they shouldn't have done. But ultimately, there's something in the attack chain has always got a human involved in it. Yeah. So when you have that type of conversation with people, it resonates, and all of a sudden they speak to somebody else, and they speak to somebody else, and we can grow the business that way. The best way to grow a business like this, though, is to find that I think you were alluding to it earlier when you talked about the national security side. Is it not incumbent on our governments and our standardization bodies to say, look, if you want to do this type of business, if you want to engage in financial services, and there already are, there's a number of different NIS2 and PCI DSS, so you have to adhere to certain compliance regimes. But compliance isn't training.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to get this message across to people. And I think it's starting to seep in that if you tell me that putting someone in front of a test for 20 minutes in the whole of the year is enough to train people in doing something they don't fully understand, then, I think we will have to change our entire education system overnight. Because
which may be the case.
You don't, well, exactly. No one learns that way. And I think that there's this radicalization of learning techniques based on compliance models, which is causing the problem. Because compliance isn't training, and training needs to be something that is engaging. And so by explaining that to people, they get a really good understanding of it. And I'm probably not answering your question straight on here. It's difficult to scale it without having these different organizations helping you do it. But for every one person I speak to, and they say, well, they want to know who our competition is. And frankly, there's a lot of competition in this space, but there's not a lot of competition that's offering the same type of profile we're offering for at the individual basis. So there's a lot of benefit to be brought from what we're doing, not just compliance. We do compliance. But if you want to train your people, why would you not get Compliance Plus? Because if you want to be able to help them be better at what they're doing, then you need to step outside of your current mindset in how these types of things are delivered.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's adequate to maybe say you could put a key and lock on your front door and say, now we're immune. Now my business is safe. When I leave here for the weekend, this business is going to be just like I left it, with all of our merchandise and inventory, and just assume that that's going to solve all your security problems. And maybe with compliance, all you need is the key and the lock. But in reality, obviously, you need a much more comprehensive security approach. You could have internal theft, you could have this, you could that, and the key and the lock, just the compliance is not.
No, and there's another great example, and this is the one I bring out for leadership too, is that for years we as human beings have understood the importance of a fire alarm. Everybody knows from kindergarten up that if you're in a building when the fire alarm goes off, what do, Jules?
Yeah, you're supposed to run outside the building.
Yeah, you get outside of the building, and then someone comes and corrals you. Someone then takes off the tick list from the entrance log to make sure that you got out of the building, so they can tell the fire brigade when they turn up there are still 10 people in the building because they're not accounted for. But we know that process. Why? Because it was drilled into us every single year at school. And we don't need to learn that again, because it's one of those innate memories we have from growing up. And firms still do a fire alarm every year to make sure that you know where to go and where to muster and what exits you do. We all get really bored of it, but we all do it. That is something we learned very early on in our days. Look at cybersecurity and ask why it is so important today. We are hyper-connected. Information moves at the click of our fingers, and it is really powerful, that information. But we have, and I try and it might be difficult to depict on this podcast, but I depict a line graph where you've got time and on the one axis, and on the other axis you've got effort. So on the time side, you have, over time, you've seen human development go like this on a linear curve, or on a, not linear, but on a standard trajectory. You've had technology that has mimicked that curve and then gone up like this. So you've got this huge gap between that hockey stick and human behavior or human understanding. That is a huge gap, and that is the behavioral gap. Because if you take that as a technology behavior gap that says, okay, that's what technology has done, that is what is enabled, but at the same time, we haven't brought the human being with it. Why? Because I don't work in tech. I work in HR, and HR is where I earn my money. And if I sit there trying to learn how to close that gap by watching videos all day long, I'm not doing my HR job. So it's about closing that gap and making sure people are more more sort of accepting of the risk and know there is, if you can explain it in a way that people understand, then you win people over very quickly.
Yeah. And I do think that more people need this. If you want to work with Andrew and if you want to work with Recyber, if you're watching this, if you're listening, go ahead and look into the show notes. We're going to have all the links. And Andrew, how can people best connect with you?
Yeah, they can drop us a message. We've got a really good deal at the moment, Jules, if you don't mind me putting it out on this session. We realize that small businesses are struggling to understand how best they can prepare themselves for this type of risk. So any business between 1 and 100 users can get Republic at £199 or $250 a month for their entire workforce, 1 to 100 users. It's a really great deal, and they can go and take advantage of a free trial. So anybody, any size organization can go and do a free trial of Republic by going onto the recyber.com website, and they can find their way to that free trial. And that's no commitment. If after 8 weeks of that free trial, you don't think the Recyber Republic will work for you, you don't have to take it. You don't have to continue. There's no commitment after that.
Yeah, nothing to lose.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely worth a trial. Andrew, thank you so much for joining the podcast. I really appreciate your expertise.
Thank you very much, Jules, for having me.